For centuries, we've used microscopes to get a peek into the hidden world of biology. But what if we had a totally new kind of lens? I mean, one that didn't just magnify cells, but could actually understand their language, spot their hidden patterns, and maybe even predict their future. This isn't science fiction anymore. We're talking about a digital microscope, one powered by AI, and it's starting to decode the fundamental workings of life itself.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Inside every single one of us is this universe of complexity. Trillions of cells, all running trillions of commands, written in a biological code we're only just now starting to really read. So what if we could actually decipher that code? What if we could find the secrets to curing diseases? Or even just understanding what makes us, well, us?
To get a sense of how we'd even start, let's look at the fight against a disease like malaria. It's not just one simple problem, right? It's this incredibly complex biological dance between a parasite, a mosquito, and our own bodies. To fight it effectively, you need to understand every single step of this microscopic battle. And that sheer scale, well, that's the perfect kind of challenge for a new kind of science.
And that brings us to our first big idea. We finally have a new lens on life. Thanks to the recent explosion in computing power, scientists have a completely new way to look at these enormous biological challenges. This new lens is a field called bioinformatics. It's all about collecting and making sense of massive amounts of biological data. It's been a huge part of modern biology for years, but now it has a new super tool that's changing the game completely: machine learning.
Okay, so how does this digital microscope actually work? Well, the first, absolutely critical step is to translate the building blocks of life, our DNA, our proteins, into a language that a computer can actually understand. We have to turn biology into data.
And it all starts with the absolute basics, the 4 letters of the DNA alphabet: adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. These 4 simple characters are what write the entire story of every living thing on this planet.
So here's the magic trick. This is how we make those letters something a machine can read. We use different coding schemes to turn them into numbers. So depending on the scheme you're using, the letter A might become a 2, or it might become 0.1260. Once you do that, a huge complex genetic sequence just becomes a long string of numbers, and that is something a machine can finally dig into.
And that is the core transformation. Once we translate it, all of that beautiful, messy, intricate biology, it becomes a vast mathematical problem, one that's just waiting for an algorithm to come along and solve it. So, with our data all ready to go, we can finally start using our digital microscope. And the first approach is something called unsupervised learning. This is basically where we hand the machine a mountain of data and just say, go find the patterns that I can't see.
A really popular way to do this is called k-means clustering. So imagine you tell a robot to sort a whole library of books that have no labels. You just want them sorted into 3 piles based on their cover designs. The robot would just randomly place 3 markers, group the nearest books to each marker, then find the new center of each pile and do it again and again until the groups are perfectly sorted. It finds the natural groupings all on its own.
And the results you can get are, well, they're incredible. Here, an algorithm took a look at this messy cloud of data from hepatitis patients, and completely on its own, it found 2 very distinct groups, Class 1 and Class 0. Now, these aren't just random clusters. They could represent totally different subtypes of the disease or different patient outcomes, things that were basically invisible to doctors who are just looking at the raw data. Okay, so if that's how AI can find unknown groups, what about teaching it to recognize something specific? This brings us to our next big idea, supervised learning. This is more like giving the machine a giant textbook full of examples and saying, learn to spot this exact thing, like a cancerous cell.
But for any of this to work in medicine, there's one thing that is absolutely crucial: trust. You can't just have a black box that spits out an answer with no explanation. We need what are called white box models. Models that can actually show their work, They provide the rules or the reasons for a diagnosis. That explainability is essential for doctors to be able to verify and actually trust what the machine is telling them.
But teaching a machine to see is definitely not simple. When an AI looks at a medical image, at first it might spot dozens of potential areas of interest, creating all these overlapping boxes. The real trick is teaching it how to collapse all of that noise into one single confident detection.
So how do they do that? It's all about teaching the machine to separate the signal from the noise. You can see it in these charts. The data on the left, that's the signal, the correct detections. On the right, that's the noise, all the false alarms.
Scientists have to find that sweet spot, that threshold, the orange line, to filter out as much of the noise as possible while keeping the real signal. It's a really delicate balancing act to build an accurate tool.
Now, we've talked about identifying what's already there, but this is where it gets really powerful. Machine learning can actually start to make predictions, forecasting everything from how a disease might progress to, pretty surprisingly, our own personalities. And yeah, in a really interesting twist, some researchers are using these exact techniques to predict psychological traits. Based on data like how people rate certain adjectives, a model can make some surprisingly accurate predictions about the big 5 personality traits. It just goes to show how versatile this digital microscope can be.
You know, one of the most fascinating ways to do this is inspired by life itself, genetic algorithms. Okay, picture this. You have a group of musicians all trying to play a perfect harmony. They play a note, they listen, and each one makes a tiny adjustment. The ones who sound better get copied, and over hundreds of generations of these tiny little improvements, they eventually achieve a perfect chord. That's a genetic algorithm. It's evolving better and better solutions over time.
And how well does it actually work? Well, in one study that was classifying different types of cancers from really complex data, a method that combined a genetic algorithm with another technique achieved an accuracy of almost 100%. That's the power of evolving a solution, one that can learn to spot cancer with near-perfect accuracy. It's just mind-blowing.
So when you put all of this together, translating life into data, finding these hidden patterns, predicting outcomes with this kind of accuracy, you really have to ask yourself, are we on the verge of a whole new scientific revolution?
And this isn't just a thought experiment. As this quote from the research shows, scientists are already building these pipelines for the real world. Their goal? To create modern surveillance systems to track and fight things like antibiotic-resistant superbugs. This is all happening right now.
Which brings us right back to our digital microscope. Today, it's helping us classify cancers and track diseases. But if this is the clarity it can give us now, at the very beginning, just imagine the secrets of our own biology it's going to reveal tomorrow.